I do the morning routine, the daycare run, the groceries, the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry 40 hours of work a week on top of it. When I finally told a group of mothers I was drowning, they didn't ask if I was okay. They told me my wife probably has it harder.
It started with a math problem. My job let me clock out a few hours before hers, so I'd pick up our kid. Then I'd have dinner ready. Simple, fair. I told myself I was being the partner everyone wants, one who just sees what needs to be done. But here's what I learned about being the one who sees eventually. You're the only one who sees. 6 a.m. I get our son up, brush his teeth, change him, dress him. He's 3, so every sock is a negotiation. I pack his lunch, my lunch, hers if she hasn't grabbed something. Drop off, then my office. 8 hours later, pick up. He's tired, so we do the post-daycare reset fresh clothes. Wash the sticky off his face, a snack that won't kill dinner. Then I cook. By the time she walks in, the table is set. The food is warm, and our son is already asking her about her day. She's not a villain. When she's present, she's warm. But somewhere along the way, her presence became optional. Not cruel, just natural. She'd say, let me handle dinner this weekend, and I'd feel relief. Saturday would come, and she'd suggest we go out. Or order in. We would, and I'd think, that's still a break. Except the takeout containers still needed washing. The recycling still needed sorting. The mental inventory of what was in the fridge still mine. 6 months in, I was scrubbing a pan and the dish soap ran out. Not low empty. I'd been squeezing the bottle at a desperate angle for 2 days. I went to the closet for a new bottle, and it hit me she didn't know. She had no reason to know. She hadn't loaded the dishwasher in weeks. She hadn't stood at that sink with a sponge. Not malice, just absence. The house ran on my awareness and my awareness alone. I told myself it was fine. I worked fewer hours, so I took on more. That was the deal, but the deal kept expanding. Grocery shopping became mine because I knew what was missing. Laundry became mine because I noticed the hamper was full. Tidying became mine because I couldn't stand the clutter. Somewhere in that expansion, I stopped being the partner who helps and became the sole employee of a household that employed one person. There's a park near our house where the daycare moms gather. I'd been going long enough that I was the token dad. One afternoon, a woman named Claire was venting about her husband's socks on the floor. Couldn't work the washing machine, helped by taking the kids to McDonald's when she asked for dinner. The other moms nodded with a kind of exhausted solidarity I recognized in my own bones. I laughed. I know the feeling. My wife does the same thing with dinner. She offers to cook and we end up at Chipotle. I expected them to laugh with me. Instead, the energy shifted. Claire tilted her head. Well, she said, but she's working, right? And she's a mom. She probably has a lot on her plate. Jen added, and you said you work fewer hours. So it makes sense you'd handle more at home. My chest tightened. These were the same women who, minutes earlier, had been describing husbands who worked full-time and still couldn't fold a fitted sheet. Now they were building a case for why my wife who worked similar hours to their husbands deserved the benefit of the doubt. I tried to explain. I do everything. Morning routine, daycare, cooking, cleaning, laundry, shopping. All of it. And I work. Claire gave me a soft, pitying look. That's so great that you're so involved. Involved. My stomach went cold. I wasn't involved. I was the sole operator. If I stopped, the whole machine stopped. But they didn't see it that way. They saw a dad who did his share. They saw a mom who was probably exhausted and deserved a break. They saw the shapeman helps. Woman wrist sand filled in the details with the story they already knew. I didn't plan what came next. The words came out before I could stop them, my jaw tight. My wife could have abandoned me and our kid at birth, and Yow'd probably still feel bad for her and not for me. Silence. I waited for someone to argue. To say no, of course, we'd see your pain. No one did. Claire looked at her shoes. Jen took a long sip of her iced coffee. One of the other moms, I can't remember her name, gave a small, awkward shrug, as if to say, well, she's still the mother. That silence landed in my ribs like a weight. It told me my exhaustion was invisible, that my labor didn't count the way hers would, that even if I did everything she was supposed to do, I would never be the one seen as carrying the weight. I drove home in a kind of numb clarity. I thought about all those TikToks and Instagram Reels I'd scrolled past, ones where a mom shows her husband's weaponized incompetence, the mismatched laundry, the burnt toast, the baffled look when asked where the ketchup is. I'd laughed at those too, but now I realized my wife was that husband. She was the one who didn't know we were out of dish soap. She was the one who offered to cook and then took us out to eat. She was the one who, without any malice, had drifted into the role of the person who is taken care of, rather than the person who does the caring. And the reason no one called it out wasn't because the dynamic was different. It was because she was a woman. When a woman does it, we call it having a supportive partner. When a man does it, we call it being a deadbeat. The roles had flipped in my house, but the judgment hadn't. The judgment was still welded to gender. I'm writing this from a kitchen I just cleaned. There's a load of laundry in the dryer. Dinner is in the oven. My son is in the bath, and my wife is scrolling on her phone in the living room. Later tonight, she'll tell me she appreciates me. And she means it. But appreciation isn't partnership. I don't hate her. I'm not leaving. I don't even really blame her. She ended up where someone else handled everything, so she stopped thinking about it. That's what humans do. But the part that grinds at meth part, I can't stop turning over eyes that if our genders were swapped, the whole world would call this what it is. Unfair. They'd tell her she deserved better. They'd say her husband needed to step up. Instead, I have a wife who sometimes offers to cook, and a group of mothers at the park who think I'm lucky to be so involved. I'm burnt out. I'm lonely in a way I didn't know existed. And I've learned something I'll never unlearn. The story people tell about who does the work in a home has almost nothing to do with who actually does it, and everything to do with who they expect to be doing it. I wish I could afford to be a stay-at-home dad. Not because I think it would be easier, I know it wouldn't, but because at least then, the shape of my life would match the shape of the story. I'd be the one whose labor was seen. I'd be the one allowed to be tired. Instead, I'm here, doing it all. And every time I hear a mother complain about her husband's weaponized incompetence, I think I know exactly how you feel, but you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Hello, I'm Dr. Julian Reed. Let's be precise about what we're observing here, because calling this weaponized incompetence is clinically lazy and, in this case, inaccurate. The wife in this dynamic is not employing a conscious strategy of feigned helplessness. What we're seeing is something far more insidious: systemic role entitlement that has calcified into institutionalized dependency. From a behavioral psychology standpoint, the wife has undergone a gradual but complete task deprioritization. When the husband assumed responsibility for the domestic sphere due to his fewer work hours, he inadvertently created a vacuum. In the absence of any requirement to engage, her executive function simply ceased allocating cognitive resources to household management. She doesn't know they're out of dish soap, not because she's pretending, but because her brain has literally classified household inventory as someone else's problem. This is diffusion of responsibility within a dyad, accelerated by traditional gender narratives that still unconsciously tell Haran the mothers at the park that domestic failure in a woman is unthinkable, while domestic labor in a man is a generous hobby. What's striking clinically is the "let me handle dinner" offer, which reliably results in takeout. This is performative contribution. She signals engagement to alleviate her own discomfort with her passivity, but the execution fails because she lacks the embedded procedural knowledge. Rhythm of the pantry, the timing, the inventory that her husband maintains daily. She has been relegated by mutual but unconscious agreement to the role of a visitor in her own household. And here the environment becomes a co-conspirator. The other mothers reinforce her invisibility. Their sympathy is not merely bias, it's collective identity protection. To acknowledge that a woman can occupy the incompetent husband role would destabilize the foundational narrative that domestic suffering is inherently gendered female. They cannot validate his burnout without implicitly indicting her, and by extension themselves. So what is she feeling? I would posit a quiet, unexamined shame. She likely does feel she works hard at her job, and because she does not witness the unbroken chain of his labor morning routines, the invisible restocking, the emotional continuity of Kersh has no genuine metric for his exhaustion. Her offers to help are genuine, but they are also the product of a mind that no longer knows what help actually requires. She has become dependent on him not just for tasks, but for the definition of what needs to be done. Now, here is the moral ambiguity that fractures this case. If this were a man, we would diagnose him as neglectful, entitled, and potentially emotionally abusive. But because it is a woman, we are tempted to see her as simply having it harder. This exposes a fault line in our clinical understanding of equity. We often mistake equalizing who does the labor for equalizing the visibility of that labor. The husband's reality is that he has been erased by his own competence. He has become so efficient at carrying the entire household that he has rendered her functional uselessness invisible to everyone, including her. The question I leave you with, one that will likely draw the sharpest division, is this: if a man were doing all of this, and a woman were the one offering takeout instead of cooking, would we be analyzing her childhood trauma? Or would we be telling her to leave? And what does your answer say about who we allow to be exhausted?